In a world where infinite knowledge is carried in a supercomputer in most of our pockets every day, ChatGPT or Google can answer almost any question you can think of at a moment's notice. It can really begin to seem silly to pack facts into our own brains and spend time and effort learning things about the world or about different subjects when any question we have can be addressed almost immediately by the technology that we possess. But what I want to talk about today is the fact that it actually does matter what's already in your head, because that foundational knowledge is what allows your brain to learn new things, because it relates them back to the foundational knowledge that it already holds. And I want to illustrate that with a fun little example. So if you've already heard of this animal, just play along with me. But I'm going to talk to you about an animal called the saiga antelope. The saiga antelope lives on the steppes in Mongolia. These are treeless grasslands in Mongolia. They're closely related to the springbok, and in fact, the horns are very similar in that they have ridges like the springbok. In body shape and composition, it's very similar to the springbok as well. However, the snout is very different from a springbok snout. The snout looks much more like a tapir's snout would look. And it also has an interesting characteristic in that its coat changes color with the seasons like an Arctic fox's would. Okay, so that is a brief description of a saiga antelope. If you did not know what Mongolian meant, if you do not know what steppes were or grasslands, what a tapir is, what a springbok is, what an Arctic fox looks like in the summer and the winter, most of what I just said wouldn't mean anything to you. But let me go through those animals. So here are pictures of a springbok, a tapir, and a fox. Most of you probably brought those images to bear as you thought about what I was saying. And here's a picture of a saiga antelope. And as you can see, it looks very similar to a springbok in some ways. It also has a face that is very similar to a tapir's face. And in the wintertime, they turn white like an Arctic fox was, while in the summer, they are brownish. So how does that relate to things that are more practical? Well, for any knowledge that you receive, not just being described an animal that you may have not heard of before, a new concept in math, a new concept in psychology or anthropology or any other subject you might be thinking about. If you don't have the foundational knowledge, your brain will not understand, and that will just be words floating in the air and probably forgotten just as quickly as they are said. The brain has to be able to encode new knowledge to something it already possesses. That way it builds knowledge upon itself. So the broader and the deeper your pre-existing knowledge, the more easily and the more richly you are able to gain new knowledge. So if you don't have a broad or a deep, font of knowledge already in your brain, you may be able to remember that there is an antelope that somebody described to you. Somebody described an animal to you. But all those other facets of it, the fact that it lives on the steppes, the fact that it has horns like a springbok, all those other things would likely slip away very quickly because your brain would have nothing to relate them to. They're meaningless without the context. So as you are teaching or learning, remember to relate things back to what you know and to try to broaden and deepen the pre-existing knowledge, that bank of knowledge in your brain, so that as you learn new things, your brain can tie it down and encode it into that growing tree of knowledge. It does not like loose hanging branches, right? It wants everything to relate in some way. And so that's just a fun example. I hope that helped you all think about how it is that those pre-existing knowledge foundations really do help us learn more effectively and more efficiently. Because if you wanted to learn about Saiga antelope and you didn't have that foundational knowledge, you would have to take Saiga antelope and then you would have to follow each of those paths, and the Saiga antelope would become your foundational knowledge. You would have to learn about Mongolia and springboks and tapirs and Arctic foxes and relate them back to them. So that's just how learning works. And if we want to learn effectively, we need to be able to do that with every piece of knowledge we bring in, figure out how it relates to something else, cement it in there, make sure your brain holds it over the long term.